So welcome to Jessistories, everyone. If you are an LGBTQIA plus member of the community, thank you so much for being here. If you're new to the channel, please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing April Little, who was in, actually, I'm going to let her explain the high control group she was in.
Yeah, I was in a conservative evangelical church for all of my adolescence. So the thing is, like from the outside, they might look like they're more contemporary and maybe like progressive because they have like modern worship music and like they have a cafe in the church, that sort of thing. But underneath the sort of glossy image is a very rigid conservative theology about gender roles, sexuality, they're anti-LGBT. And I actually, since leaving, I sometimes sort of check back in to see what's going on their website and everything. And it's like they've only gotten more conservative. They're very pro-Trump. So yeah.
Yeah, that's like Twin Flames universe too. They love Trump also. They also indoctrinate that too. But if you would like to, you can introduce yourself of who you are, what you do.
Yeah, I'm a queer autistic theologian and podcaster. My podcast is Reclaiming the Garden, where me and my friend Anna talk about the intersection of LGBTQ and Christian identity. Because I am still a Christian, I'm just on the more like progressive and open end of it now. I'm part of the United Methodist Church. I'm very passionate about working with youth and creating spaces where LGBTQ plus youth can thrive because I, didn't thrive when I was a teenager. So yeah, I'm working on a memoir about my whole experience of leaving the evangelical church. Yeah.
Yay. Thank you so much. What is your, well, you just kind of went into that, but what is your full background in your faith?
My family started attending this non-denominational. They always like typically when you hear a non-denominational church, it tends to be more of like a conservative evangelical with like modern worship music, modern, you don't have to like dress fancy to church, that kind of thing. We started going when I was in sixth grade. And as I was like a rising seventh grader during the summer, people were asking me like, oh, are you going to go to church camp? And I was like, oh, I'm not sure. But then I ended up going. And during the church camp, there's like morning and evening teachings, like, sermons and worship and stuff. And then there's also an hour allotted in the day for you to read your Bible on your own. So that very much sort of kickstarted my faith. And I sort of gave my life to Jesus on the very like final night of camp where, the pastor like asked, he's like, oh, if you want to accept Jesus into your heart, pray this prayer with me. And so that's where you like repent of your sins and accept Jesus as Lord and Savior who like died for you, that sort of theology. And yeah, I was a part of, the very active youth group at that church until I went to college. When I started to realize I was queer in high school, I obviously got like very afraid and confused because I was like, oh, if I'm the good Christian girl, this shouldn't be happening to me. I thought I was like following all the rules, so I couldn't be attracted to women. And so I just sort of repressed those feelings down, very much like started to compartmentalize and disassociate from those emotions, which just up all of my emotional processing. Yeah. And in college, finally, is when like I just thank God that I decided to go to a women's college in Virginia, Hollins University, and that definitely like rocked my world because there were, of course, I mean, I say women's college, but some students there were not identifying as women and used different pronouns, and so that got me confused because of all my evangelical theology about like gender roles and stuff, and that's when I started to question. And then, of course, my first semester of college is when the 2016 election happened. And so I saw my church celebrating Trump's win, and I was like, these are not the values that you taught me. Like, what's going on? And so that got me to like start to really question. I looked into like LGBTQ affirming theology and sort of came to that position, started to remember like that I had crushes on girls in high school, came to terms with queer identity. Yeah, that's my background.
Well, thank you. How has your beliefs changed since coming out of the high control group, Angelica and
Evangelical so evangelical, or some people say like evangelical, but yeah,
evangelical church.
Yeah, I guess like I said, I discovered like LGBTQ affirming theology. There's this really great organization called Q Christian Fellowship, which creates community groups for queer Christians and also has a conference each year. I guess a yearly conference will have like just recently happened, and I'm going to be on the podcast stage there, so that's going to be really fun.
Congrats on that.
Yeah. And just figuring out like how there are like so many denominations in the Christian church. And I'm like, wow, like with so many denominations, like how can where I grew up say they got everything right, they don't actually hold the market on truth. And so just looking into like going to various different Protestant churches, like the ELCA, which is like the Progressive Lutheran Church, the Episcopal Church, finally did land, I guess, in the United Methodist Church, because there are some institutional issues with it. I mean, it was only this year that the denomination took anti-LGBTQ language out of its like denominational book, which is called the Book of Discipline. But they did finally at least do that. I mean, but a lot of progressive United Methodist churches have been like in active rebellion against some of the discriminatory policies. And I've found just great communities there, definitely deconstructed some purity culture ideas, like realized that I didn't necessarily like have to wait until marriage to have sex. For me right now, I guess I'm just like waiting for the right person and right time, whenever I feel that is. And definitely just getting more involved in like progressive politics and connecting with communities to try to make the world a better place.
I like that. That is all very good work to be doing. And your realization, I guess, of belief. When did you realize you were queer?
Yeah, so I actually, you know what? I might pull up a excerpt of my memoir here to read, because I really like the way that
definitely. I don't know how we can do that on here though. Let's see.
Well, I can just read it. I mean, yeah.
Okay. Go
I'm
for
just
it.
pulling
Yeah,
it up.
definitely. Yes, please do share.
I hope my computer is able to handle having two things open at once. It was at my freshman homecoming dance. I mostly hung out with friends in my grade at the edge of the gym and had smiling, awkward photos taken of us and our dorky dance moves. But at some point, I ventured into the center fray of people dancing near the DJ. I pushed into a crowd of seniors and I found a friend among the grinding bodies. Her name was Brenna, not real name, but I had met her in Creative Writing Club. Her red dress was several shades brighter than her dyed hair, and she was swaying up against everyone around her. She smiled at me and gestured for me to come closer, so I did. And right then, looking at her as she swayed, it was as if something in my head had clicked into place, the curves of her body suddenly present, the shine in her eyes, and I knew something was different, and I couldn't quite put my finger on why. I felt giddy and my chest got warm, the way I usually felt around my perceived boy crushes. But since I was having these feelings while looking at a girl, I didn't recognize her as a crush at first. Though I was confused, I smiled back at Brenna and danced with her, letting my gaze go up and down, examining the details of the dress, the puffy skirt, the black tulle in a few places. A few weeks later, as I walked out of a yellow restroom stall to the sink before Creative Writing Club started, the image of me kissing Brenna came to my mind, unbidden, sudden. And that was when my confusion turned into fear and shame. Badly translated verses from my Bible sprang up in my head like weeds, along with the voice of my youth pastor saying, dating leads to marriage, and marriage is only between one man and one woman. So I guess that was the initial realization of queerness. And then, of course, after my whole experience of repressing and literally forgetting those sort of memories, after I sort of theologically was like, it's okay to be queer, then my body, I think, sort of was like, okay, it's okay to bring these memories back again then. And so I had all these memories and I was like, but I don't know what to do with that. And I told my sister, August 2017, I was like, I think I had crushes with girls in high school. I don't know what that means. And then it was finally, in my sophomore year of college, I had a crush on a grad student in one of my creative writing classes who also had dyed red hair. I have a type.
You too. Don't worry.
And by realizing that I definitely had feelings for her and I could see myself with a woman like her, I finally, when I was hanging out with a group of my friends from high school who weren't Christians, so I knew it was safe to tell them, they were sort of talking about some crushes that they had, boys who had caught their eye. And then my friend Harley, a non-binary lesbian, they were talking about their girlfriend. And then I was like, what should I say? Should I say that I had a crush on a girl this semester? And so I did. And I was like, okay, I think I can say that I'm queer. So, yeah.
That is awesome. I love your story. And I love your paragraph. Was that a paragraph that you read?
A few paragraphs, yeah.
Well, they were really good. Very well written.
Thank you.
Very excited for it to come out. Whenever it does. What was your journey in recognizing you're autistic?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I didn't talk until the age of 3. I would usually sort of grunt and point before that, because I clearly understood language. I just wasn't talking yet. And then sort of I looking back on childhood, like and now I have like very bad small motor skills. Okay, yeah, I should say right now I'm talking about deficits. I will get to the strengths, but so I feel like there's always been a kind of feeling that I'm like, I don't think I'm neurotypical. And then specifically when I was studying abroad in Paris in spring of 2018, I definitely got very overwhelmed by like the completely new situation and just everything, you know, in my life being different. And I was like, oh, it's because I'm autistic and I got this social anxiety. And but then my sister sort of was like, well, you don't have like an official diagnosis. Maybe don't use that term so loosely, which like I get on one hand, I now think that like self-diagnosis is okay, but at the time I really hadn't done that much like research or communication with the autistic community, so I sort of like shelved it for a little bit. And then it was in spring of 2022 that they were a Christian at the time, they're not now, but a writer, DL Mayfield, has this Substack called, well, at the time it was called God is My Special Interest. Now it's called Healing is My Special Interest. And they wrote about their experience of being someone socialized as a woman who grew up in like conservative evangelicalism. And I realized as they were talking about their experience of realizing they're autistic, I was like, oh, like, you know, we focus so much on the boys who like trains and not about the girls who are like are obsessed with religion or God.
That's true.
Yeah, and I realized I definitely have like a lot of hyperfixations. I mean, I graduated in the spring with my master's in theology. You know, I'm a person who can very much focus on a lot of nerdy stuff and definitely have some like sensory issues, sensory processing things. And I also, yeah, in terms of strengths, like my passion for things being so intense, I think my joy can be quite contagious, and I enjoy sort of how realizing I'm autistic has got myself to be kinder to myself and trying to like love the way that my mind and body works, and to of course help me advocate for neurodivergent and other disabled people in our society. So
Understandable. I know with me, I did get diagnosis, but I was self-diagnosing. For women in general, it's harder to get a diagnosis.
right, I mean, especially like once you're an adult, it's very like difficult and expensive. And so I personally have chosen, I don't think I'm going to do that, because I think the particular accommodations I need are hopefully things that I can just like communicate with my supervisor. But I know other people, yeah, no, it's like you know, just determine weigh the pros and cons of what's right for you.
Well, yeah. And just in general, I was going to say for women to get a diagnosis, because it's based off of a white, cisgendered male, that's where most statistics come from. Most of the late diagnoses that are happening today are a lot of females are self-diagnosis, but you also have to be really specific, because I was very specific. I made sure I got a female. And actually, she was really nice. She gave a big discount. So some people give huge discounts because I don't have any insurance. So there are some ways to still get it cheaper. I think the total was like maybe 325 at most, when it's normally like 5,000.
Did the person doing your assessment have to like talk to people who knew you as a kid? Because I know that's like, or wait, I guess was your just ADHD or autism or?
It was everything. I tested for
Okay.
ADHD, autism, bipolar, depression. I did everything. So I did all of it. And she asked me my background and family, and which my family does have ADHD at least shown, and dyslexia and many other things, because autism and ADHD are genetic. So if you just
Yeah,
one
my dad
person,
has said that mental health doesn't like, or mental health issues don't just run in our family, they gallop. Which I think is kind of funny.
I like the way you said that. Yeah, I learned after the fact that it's a possibility that both of my parents have it, because my sister has at least ADHD. She hasn't formally been diagnosed with autism, but I was. And sometimes you only get 1 out of 2 having autism when you have 2 parents with it, or 1 parent with it. It's always one of or the other parent. I only know this because that's who I work with. I work with children with autism. I work with children with
Oh, cool.
ADHD. I work with children with mental everything who are also everywhere on the spectrum. So I was very familiar with it. So I made sure my psychologist who was doing her intake of me got all the information she needed and knew every step of the way of how I was feeling when we did our 6-hour testing thing that comes after the initial family background history. and then the telling you afterwards. So it's a long process. It's not short. And the list, because
Mhm.
there's so many women today trying to get in for autistic assessment,
Yeah, in the US,
it's
it's
hard
really
to get
long.
it. But yeah, I thought that was important to bring up because you brought up the self-diagnosis. So it is definitely, yes, it's a good thing to self-diagnose because
Mhm.
you will probably know just as much
Yeah, just as long as like
being
you're not using the term like lightly the way that some people are like, oh, so OCD, like you should look
yeah,
into like the community and things. But like, yeah, it's absolutely valid.
exactly. And on top of that, autism, at least in females, it doesn't necessarily manifest the same way it does in
Hmm.
males. So females, like you gave examples of hyperfixations can be like for me, it's Pokemon and other
Mm-hmm.
things. Everyone has different ones. And for me, at least sensory wise, I have to have soft. That's why for myself I grabbed that. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I had lots of stimming things. Like I'm constantly like moving my fingers and like
Yeah, this is one of mine. But yeah. See, it's good to share in that too. Trying to make sure, just like even with my notes, to make sure I get everything in here. Okay, what is Christian nationalism? Did I say that right?
Yeah, Christian nationalism is a belief that America was founded as a Christian nation. And so we need to go back to those beliefs and values and to systematize like Christian belief systems into our government at every level. This belief system is one of the main reasons why Trump won the 2024 election. Like despite the fact that Trump, at least to me, does not seem to be an actual Christian, like he's had multiple wives and affairs and he's said before that he's never asked God for forgiveness. Like, so I could list so
And
many
he's married
things,
to an immigrant too. Just keep that in mind as his
right?
policies getting put into place.
Yeah, but the thing is that the evangelical voting bloc, you can look at the statistics. I think it was about like 80% or more of white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump, and they believe, despite all the evidence they've been shown, that he'll still advocate for their values and this Christian nationalist belief system in the White House. And I mean, in Project 2025, we see that, we see how they want to take away all reproductive rights. They want to dismantle the Department of Education because they want there to be Christian private schools that get funded. They want to erase trans people from society. They probably want to get rid of like equal marriage. I mean, yeah, they want to like create a theocracy. And so I can probably give you several links to good resources that talk about Christian nationalism. Brad Onishi and Andrew Whitehead have done a lot of great work researching it. There's sort of different levels of like where people are in the sort of spectrum of Christian nationalism. There are the people sort of at the top who are really the leaders, and there's folks who are more like, what is it? It's people who like aren't necessarily like super fervent, but are sort of like your average churchgoer in an evangelical church that's sort of like compliant with it, even if they're not like actively in the cause. And there's a YouTube channel called The New Evangelicals that covers a lot of news and events about Christian nationalism. So yeah,
New. What is it? So
it's called
new.
The New Evangelicals. I think when the founder Tim Whitaker created it, I think now he feels different about using the word evangelicals because now he thinks that it's not necessarily he was trying to sort of reclaim it, and I don't think it's a word that can really be reclaimed because of all the political baggage. But yeah, that's the name of the channel. It is not evangelical, even though it's called The New Evangelicals.
Well, it's good for everyone to get educated on it. I've been writing notes on some of the names and everything you've given me. I do that.
Yeah, it's important to know about it because I mean we're going to be fighting it the next 4 years. We're going to
Exactly.
be fighting it really hard.
And this channel, I'm planning on reaching out to a lot more LGBTQIA, whether they're survivors of a cult
Mm-hmm.
or authors. I do have a couple authors already on my channel, just everywhere. I want more
We
voices.
need to protect our trans siblings, like I mean,
Exactly.
I have a friend who's really worried about their health care. Like,
It's terrible. I hate it. It's like it's not exactly the same as black and white and way back in the 50s, 60s. I don't know when that
mm-hmm.
was, but for the LGBTQIA, just as for those of color, we
Mm-hmm.
haven't had our rights, not fully at least. I think we've only had the equal marriage, which is now gradually getting taken away.
And also,
10
I should point
years?
out because we both are passionate about like disability rights. A lot equal marriage there isn't necessarily equal marriage for disabled people in the U.S. right
No,
now. Like
there's not at all.
if they're on like disability benefits, if they get married, they usually like lose them. So
And
Yeah.
they're getting their healthcare taken away during this
Yes,
period
right.
too.
Well, what's interesting, what frustrates me is that I think some people were like, oh, I hope Trump gets rid of Obamacare, but not the Affordable Care Act. And it's like,
The
they're
same
the
thing.
same thing. I do think maybe it wasn't the best thing on the Democrats' part to like label it Obamacare, because then like all Republicans are like against it, but it's actually just like the Affordable Care Act. Anyway.
Exactly. It's everyone that is not majority is getting their rights taken away right now in the process
Mm-hmm.
of which I hope that Trump gets lazy like he did in 2016 and doesn't do everything
I
in
don't know though,
policy
because
instead.
like again, I hope I'm wrong about this, but like when you look at Project 2025, the sort of document, like the long ass document, a mandate for leadership. I mean, I haven't actually read it. I've read like watched a lot of YouTubers analyze it, and well, they want to get rid of like civil servants who are like career civil servants who can't be that aren't partisan in the government. They want to get rid of those people and replace them with like Trumpers. So I'm like, if he does that, then he could maybe get more powerful and like not, like you said, not lazy. But I'm hoping I would be happy to be wrong about that. But we'll
Well,
see.
right now at least, Biden has appointed a lot that can potentially block him in the long run of
Mm.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
Judges, I don't understand fully their role, but I know he's done it in three branches and plus appointed someone
We need
something.
we need term limits on the Supreme Court. Otherwise, we're really like,
Yeah, well, I'm really hoping that, well, either way, we're in for a big fight. And I know I'm definitely going to be using my channel more towards the fight. And I will finish up my behind the scenes background of Escaping Twin Flames. That will get finished eventually. But I do already have trans voices. I have three of them,
mhm,
interview wise, that are on my channel. And I'm trying to highlight their voices more too. Yeah, I hope to get more trans voices on here too
mhm,
that aren't afraid to speak and have their voice be heard because yes,
mhm,
we can stand with them and be
mhm,
there for them, but ultimately their voice is most important because their
mhm.
voice, they
Yeah.
speak the truth, they speak their experience. We can
Mhm,
only stand by their experience and
mhm.
support them in any way we can. But yeah. Anyway, we're both gonna go off.
Yeah.
Well, you already went on that, really. The how has I can't even say the word evangelical Christianity deeply impacted politics.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, like there's the statistics about how many voted for Trump, and like, so many of like the people in Congress, like just this week, there was a Republican congresswoman arguing like people of the same biological sex could use like the restroom, like only biological women could use the women's restroom, and it's because of like trying to protect women, but it's actually like rooted in this like evangelical gender ideology that like God creates only men and women, and like God doesn't make mistakes. There's this trans Christian theologian Austin Hartkey who has in his book Transforming, he talks about like his interpretation of Genesis is not that like God created all these binaries, but God created all these spectrums actually. Like there's, the diversity in creation is beautiful and we should embrace it.
I like that. That's pretty good. I don't know what to say on that. What inspired you to want to write your memoir?
Well, I was a creative writing major in undergrad, and I guess it's starting in high school I got just really into writing stories, and then I was in sort of my second and third creative writing classes in undergrad that I did creative nonfiction, exploring writing about my own stories. And after I had written like an essay about my experience of the 2016 election, I was like, I think I have a memoir in my hands. And so I kept, writing about my faith deconstruction, and especially with some poetry as well. And it was, I guess, end of my junior year that I was like, when I was proposing my senior honors thesis, I was like, I'm going to write a memoir about my faith deconstruction in college. And so that it ended up being an 171 page honors thesis, which is like more than double the minimum required pages, but I had, a lot to write about. And so since the honors thesis, I've been expanding and revising it. I'm in conversations with the publisher right now. I still need to actually send some sample chapters to continue those conversations, but hopefully within the next few years or so, because I do want to go through the publisher that I'm talking with. So
Yay. Congrats on that. And the very last question, if you would like anyone to follow you anywhere. Can you let them know?
Yeah. So I am on Instagram, April_the writer. I just joined BlueSky. I don't know if you've.
I'm on BlueSky too. I'm gonna go find you then.
Yeah. I'm April_the writer because they don't allow underscores in their usernames. So April_the writer there. And my podcast, Reclaiming the Garden, is at Reclaim the Garden on Instagram. So
Reclaiming. Okay. And I am gonna also leave links down below for everyone to go and follow you and to stay informed of whenever your memoir comes out. And it's Reclaiming the Garden podcast, right?
well, the actual Instagram handle is at Reclaiming the Garden. I can provide you the link for like the Spotify and Apple Podcast
Yes,
links
please.
to my podcast. Yeah.
So they can follow you there too. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for this very educational, honestly, conversation.
Yes.
And hopefully we stay in contact. And
Yes, definitely.
let's see. For those that have stayed for the entire interview, if you could like, subscribe, and share this video with lots of people. Help our voices be heard, part of the LGBTQIA plus and disabled community, since we are both part of both. Please share it to anyone you know, even if they're a frenemy, even if they're a Trumper, I don't care. Just share.
We honestly need to we need to show these conservative Christians that are like the ways of Jesus are like not what you're doing right now. So
Nope, not at all, especially over stupid bathrooms. But anyway, thanks for being here.